Welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today, our guest is Graciela Tiscareño-Sato. As a daughter of entrepreneurial Mexican immigrants, Graciela made her way from a small town in Colorado to UC-Berkeley as an Air Force ROTC scholarship cadet. After earning her degree, she served 10 years in the Air Force as an aircrew member and instruction navigator. Since then, she's founded a company to publish award-winning literature to showcase positive contributions to Latino Americans in the USA. I'm so pleased she's here to share her story with us. Welcome to the show, Graciela.
Thank you, Tyler. I love this idea to be able to inspire more kids around the country. So you heard in that intro a little bit of unusualness there, not your typical bio of your typical speaker maybe that you've seen. And I like it that way because very early on in my life, as the oldest of 5 kids born to Mexican immigrants, I started doing things differently. So I'm going to show you a few pictures that I show when I do live school presentations. And then I'll show you a couple of models. But I really want to delve into how did this oldest daughter of Mexican immigrants that are, no military background in our family. I was barely born here. I was born like this far over the southern border in El Paso in Texas. So how did that happen and I ended up doing all that? So that's the story that I want to share with you briefly here. So here's some pictures. Title slide, How Military Aviation Found This Daughter of Immigrants. The story begins, like I said, in El Paso. But I like to ask a question of the audience first. And this is especially important if you're in middle school, if you're in high school. This is something nobody asked me when I was a kid. And I love to ask this at the beginning of the presentation before I tell you what my life turned into. Who are you in 20 years or 30 years? And what's your life like in those 20 years and 30 years? What's your family's life like? I want to ask because people usually do not ask teenagers this question. And if you don't have that long-term view of what's possible, the decisions that you make today might be not as powerful as they might be. So again, my story starts as the daughter of Tina and Arturo Tiscareño. My mommy's from Madera, Chihuahua, and papi's from Ciudad Juarez. So I start life there. We moved to Colorado, and my parents had 4 more children. So I became the oldest of 5. The pictures you see here, we're very traditional, very Catholic. My parents had very strong ideas of what the role of a girl is in a family. And if your parents are anything like mine, immigrants from the, traditions from the old country, you know what I'm talking about. So I would lay in the grass in my backyard and I see these awesome contrails going over the Rocky Mountains. And I'd wonder, where are those airplanes going? I wonder if I can go do that someday. I wanted to escape my situation because I felt like my life was already scripted for me because I was supposed to get married and have kids and all that. So I wanted another way out. So I started showing up at school, just really wanting to find another way. And one day in 8th grade, my principal approached me and she said the following words. She said, I see you at an elite university one day, perhaps even Harvard. Okay, I'm in an agricultural town in northeastern Colorado. My response was, where's that? I had no idea what Harvard was, 0. But the seed was planted that moment that I belong at an elite university. So how much did these words change my life trajectory? Well, take a look at my office in my 20s. This is where I worked. So the question is, how did that happen? Well, I would show up in the counselor's office and I'd say, how exactly does a kid like me go to college? I've heard it's possible in this country, but how does that happen? And you wouldn't believe it, but her husband was an Air Force major. And she said to me, Mrs. Burgess said, come to my house for dinner. My husband's family was bigger than yours. He's from Appalachia, and he will tell you what he did. And that is how this kid learned about the Air Force ROTC scholarship to go to college first and serve in the military later. This is the opposite of what high school students are already familiar with, which is the recruiters in the cafeteria wanting you to come and join the military now. This is the opposite of that. And a lot of the work I do is to tell you right now as a kid, as a teenager, that there's another way. There's another leadership way to get your education paid for. Because if I didn't have this counselor and she didn't have that husband, none of what I'm about to show you even happened. So I acknowledge the miracle of that woman and her husband being put in front of me because they mentored me to the scholarship, to applying to Berkeley. But then there's the community guilt. When you're a girl doing something this radical in a community where nobody has a college degree. The guilt starts. And I put this in Spanish on purpose. My neighbors would say, ¿De veras vas a dejar a tu mamá? With all the judgment, which means, are you really going to leave your mother? Really? That's what you say to a girl who just got a 4-year scholarship and just got admitted to Berkeley. But that's how it went down, and it still happens today. And luckily I was strong enough to not cave to that. I know girls who've actually abandoned scholarships and abandoned college because of the guilt. So this happened in my life, and I just want to tell you. But God bless my parents. They drove me out 1,000 miles from northern Colorado to Berkeley, sight unseen. College visits? What's that? Didn't happen. I just knew that this is the #1 school for architecture, and that's where I wanted to go. And that's how I became a cadet at Berkeley. The scholarship is try before you buy, so you do a year and you commit the 2nd year. 4 months later, it's time to go home for Christmas. I buy sweatshirts for everyone. My whole family's wearing Cal sweatshirts. And all the pain of leaving and all of the chaos associated with leaving home and actually making this decision, it came back around very quickly. I brought my uniform home, and my mom took this picture of me standing in the snowy front yard. And then she looked at me and she said, "Vamos a visitar a las vecinas," which means let's go visit the neighbors. Because suddenly my mom is proud of this new person that I'm becoming. As much of a shock as it was, now there's some pride. And visit the vecinas, we did. After I graduated from Berkeley, I went down the road, became a 2nd lieutenant. My parents drove back to the campus to put the insignia on my uniform. And then shortly thereafter, I went down the road to the Sacramento area to start training in the T-43, undergraduate navigator school. So this was my office right out of college, classroom plus airplane. And then that's graduation day when I got my wings. And guess what? My parents who'd made the drive for my graduation at Berkeley and putting on the insignia, they drove back out a year later to be there the day I got my wings. This was my class. I think 32 of us started, and then it always shrinks down. Not everybody makes it. And yep, at schools, I always show this and I say, what do you see here? What's different? And everybody notices I'm the only woman. And that's still the case. In lots of classes, there's only one woman. And that's just kind of the way the military is doing it. But you know what? The airplane doesn't care who flies it as long as you're technically competent. And then I began deploying more training in this airplane, which is a refueling, it's a gas station. I'll show you my model real quick. This is a KC-135 model. You can see we're actually actively building it right now during the sheltering in place. Here's the boom. So this is how we flow fuel from our 10 fuel tanks, 6 here, 2 here, 2 here on the wings. And another airplane comes up and attaches, and we fly and we give them gas. And we do this 5 miles up, about 300 miles, 350 per hour, depending on the airplane. So, wow, child of immigrants doing that, huh? So suddenly I'm in Saudi Arabia, I'm flying over Iraq, doing combat air patrol over Baghdad after the war. And this is my first crew. You know, we're doing the cool people on the wing pose. And the whole time, I just can't even believe any of this is happening. Night on the town looked like this. We all dressed up in our abayas to head out. This is a pilot, navigator, 2 boom operators. Boom operators are the people laying on their stomach in the back of the plane here, operating this. So the 2 young women in the middle are the boom operators, and then there's a pilot on the end over here. So this is a night on the town, girls' night out. And that first deployment, we flew 39 combat missions, or 37, something like that. And we were awarded an air medal for combat operations for meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight. So I pause here and again, how did I ever imagine any of this would happen in my life? And I never imagined it. Sometimes I got to fly with all women, like this time in England, but usually not. Usually it looked like this. And that's fine, because again, the airplane doesn't care. You know, we're all trained and we're competent. So it's pilot, co-pilot, and the navigator. So the 3 of us are officers. And then the person that's sitting a little bit lower in the jump seat, that's the boom operator, again, who operates the boom. So it's always a crew of 4. So we learn lots of teamwork. And that's it. That's all I got for the pictures. But I show you that because I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. Thank you. You know, it's a quick little blur. And, you know, from there, it went on to another, 24 countries that I got to go to, about 24 different countries. I've been all over Asia. I've been all over Europe. It was really amazing. And along the way, I also finished my master's degree. So once I was there and I had figured out that there's scholarship money for undergraduate, very soon thereafter, I realized that there's organizations like the American Association of University Women that would pay for my graduate degree. So while I was flying, while I was actively deploying, I was also doing my master's degree. So I finally, when I finished my military career, I had my global management and marketing degree completed. So when I talk to young people, I say, yes, the military opens up incredible doors, incredible opportunities, but please understand the leadership opportunities. And please understand there's these people called officers who make 3 times more money than the person that enlists right out of high school. I need you to know that, because nobody would have told me had I not had that one counselor and her husband. So a lot of the work I do to tell this story is to reach, especially communities of color, where the recruiters are always there looking for us, because that's who's reproducing, right? Especially the Latino community. So yeah, we're always going to enlist. We're always going to have a very proud military history. We have for decades. But we also need to know that we're leaders. And we need to pursue the path of leadership, and especially the young women. And nothing makes me happier than to go into schools and do this talk and, tell my story, and then have kids as young as 8 years old tell their teachers later. And then I get the email, my girls came back from recess and they said, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to fly airplanes too. Because see, now that's a thing that is possible, because somebody showed up with that story. And that's really what motivates me. And I really love, just inspiring, as young as kindergarten. And then if you're already in middle school and high school, then let's talk and get serious about how to find the funding for school, because the funding is there. You got to do the work to connect to it. Start your scholarship tracker research early on. And that's a lot of the work that I do, because we're in the United States of America, and there's billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars from companies, private foundations, and lots of organizations just waiting for you to apply. And there's so much. And that's why I do this work. And what do I do now? Well, now I'm a mother and an entrepreneur. I have 3 children, a blind 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, and then my 13-year-old son. So girl, boy. We are a musical household. We're a crazy household. We just added a Siberian Husky to the mix because we didn't have enough chaos. But the work I do now is as an entrepreneur, and I created a publishing company because this story I just told you, my son saw it and he called me Captain Mama when he saw me wearing the flight suit. And he called me Captain Mama. And that inspired me to write, good night, Captain Mama. Buenas noches, Capitan Mama. Literally a bedtime story of a little boy seeing his mom in the flight suit for the first time. And I did the research that night, and I learned that never in the history of children's literature had anybody written a bilingual book about women flying airplanes or women serving in the military. It just hadn't been done. And I realized that night when my son called me Captain Mama, that this is what I had to do. And so that's what we're doing. It's my story of adventure and travel and aviation. And then the second book is Captain Mama Surprise. So this is actually a field trip at the plane. And now we're developing the third book. And so for elementary schools, I bring these stories and these amazing illustrations by a woman who's a daughter of an Air Force veteran. And for middle school and high school, we go straight to the STEM of aviation. We talk about, the different paths to aviation, and then the college going thinking and track. So I hope that this was weird and inspirational for you. I hope you like my little model that literally we're building it right now. The wings are taped on. But I love that work and I love storytelling. So I look forward to answering all your questions. And Tyler, back to you.
Thank you. What an incredible story. Now, I'll have to admit, one of the things that really was compelling to me was you talking about your story and being able to buck traditional conventions and culture and stereotypes to be a pioneer and do things that you didn't know had been done before, right? Now, prior to teaching 5th grade, I was actually a university professor and I was on the scholarship committee. And I will echo what you said. If you start the process early and craft yourself a story. When I was looking at who to give scholarships to, that was the number one criteria for me. It wasn't GPA, it wasn't extracurriculars, it was what is their story. And I would read every single essay and look for why that person was unique and what would they bring to the university. Now you have an amazing story, and I appreciate you telling us about it. But what I'm really curious about is, you know, you talked about your advisor in high school that kind of planted that seed.
Yeah.
But for most people, simply having a seed planted isn't enough to go against everything they've been taught and known. What was it that made you willing to try new things and reach these really incredible goals?
Oh, thank you. So for me, it really started, I'm going to say ninth grade. In ninth grade, I was a cheerleader, and I was in band, and I played volleyball. And so my friends, my peer group, were all girls with college educated parents. So my first exposure to other ways that people live, you know, going to their houses, they had maybe 2 cars, they had careers like helicopter pilot, transportation engineer, school district administrator. So they were all professionals. And my parents were, you know, my father was a tailor, and my mom stayed home and found different ways to make money with in-home stuff, like packaging fishing hooks was one of them. Okay. So our vacations, Tyler, were pile in the car and drive to Mexico or El Paso, like I said, you know, and airplanes never happened. So the question you're asking of how did I decide to go against all conventions and norms and everything I was learning, it's I saw this other way that people were living. I saw my friends go to Austria for summer vacation or Hawaii for spring vacation. And I'm like, wow, that'd really be great to like go places. You know, and so I was motivated at the age of 15 to follow the path of other options and more mobility and more travel and just what I saw as a more active, interesting life that involved the world, because I was always very curious about the world. And so it was being exposed to these other careers and the fact that they all had in common those college educations. And that's why when I went to my counselor, I said, so how does somebody like me go to school? Because I want to go do that. And I didn't ever think that it wasn't possible. I know that that's what holds a lot of kids back now, is they are literally told by other people that people like us don't go to college, or that college is too expensive, or it's better to work, and all this stuff that makes me absolutely crazy. But no, that was it. It's like I saw this other way to live. And I'll tell you that my life has turned into that kind of life. Like if I could tell you anything, and that's the question I asked in the beginning, what's my life in 30 years and 20 years? I asked that question very early on. And I really want kids to think about it and teens to think about it, because what I have done now as an adult, it blows my mind. You know, we've gone to Europe with our 3 kids. We've gone to Japan with my in-laws and our 3 kids. We've taken my kids to Mexico for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. Had the party in El Paso, and then went across the border to Chihuahua on a bus, and then took a train all the way across Mexico. And it was amazing to travel with the Mexican parents one year and the Japanese grandparents the other year. So I have brought that life of travel and just the awe of travel and culture to my kids, who are half Japanese and half Latino and are learning multiple languages. So that's what powered me through. Like I just saw there's this other way to live, and I wanted it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, kids today have the added advantage of resources like this. Their eyes can be opened through things like YouTube, and you don't have to be on the cheer squad or, you know, have friends that do things. We can now do a lot of that virtually, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. But whether it's, you know, back in the good old days or today, if you want to do incredible things, you're going to have some opposition. And certainly if you're bucking the trends and breaking stereotypes, I'm sure you face discrimination and stereotypes and prejudice. How did you fight through that, especially at a young age?
You know, I think the worst of it, and I was actually going to share another slide with you, but I'll probably do it afterwards. I think the worst of it is when you are confronted by people in your community who, very, very real memory from ninth grade. People in your community who think that because you're trying to improve your situation, that you are somehow trying to be better than them. And this is very age appropriate kind of way to think. I get that. I understand it now. But I remember being surrounded one day in 9th grade in the hallways. I was at my locker and I forgot a book. So I came back out during class. And so the hallways are empty, just me, the locker. And these 3 other Mexican American girls approached me. And they said, you know, like this whole attitude thing, right? They're like, so who do you think you are, trying to be so much better than us? Or like that, right? And I'm just here to get my book. But that attitude that because I was a scholar, because I was doing well and getting recognized, that I was somehow a threat to them, that they took it personally, that animosity, can I call it animosity? That wasn't even as much discrimination as it was animosity from within the greater Latino community where I was living that was trying to keep me down. That is a bigger threat, I think, to young people because, yeah, the information's there, okay? Because if you're hearing messages that you don't belong in school or that you're you know, and I hear this from African American friends as well, you know, like you're selling out or you're trying to be too white and like all this, right? Like, oh, only white people get to be educated. I mean, all that's junk, right? And so I think that's the hardest thing for teens to get over is those kind of messages coming from people closer to you, the naysayers. And, you know, I have a slide where I actually showed this path and, you know, you're here and your dreams and goals are there. And literally on both sides of the path are people with hammers and bats and stones ready to smash you every step of the way on your way to what you want to do. And you just have to have tunnel vision and just ignore them. And I'll see you on the other side. You know, I'll look back where you're still standing and I'll be over there. So I think that empowerment, like that deep empowerment from within, that's half of it. The other half is the work to persuade the parents like mine to stop keeping your kids down. And to stop smothering them by making them stay home because you want them close to home. And my mother says a beautiful thing. She says, the only thing we can give our kids is roots and wings, raíces y alas, right? And so I do a lot of work to address the parents in Spanish. La vista de largo plazo is actually a workshop I do for parents where we talk about this. We talk about the culture of low expectations. And so I do both because I don't want the kids to be all excited, like, yes, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go do that. And then the parents just continuously keep them down, right? So I think both need to have higher expectations. And that's a big part of what we could do because otherwise the information is available. It'll never reach them. They won't look for it or they'll look for it and doubt that it works for them.
Well, and the truth is people that want to take you down and people that want to go against you, that doesn't go away after your teenage years. You're going to experience that your whole life. If you're successful, if you're active, if you're trying to do things, there are going to be people who take you down. But it sounds like not only did you have support in your life, but you helped mold that support. So as you worked with your parents to help them see your vision, then they could support you in the way that you needed to be supported. Were there any other instrumental people as you were growing up that helped give you that extra added level of support?
Ooh, I love it. Yeah, in longer presentations, I do highlight another teacher. So I mentioned the principal who first planted the seed of elite university, which was the opposite of just go to school down the road, which is what too many Latino students hear, right? So she planted that seed of somewhere else. 2 years later, I had a drafting teacher, Mr. Jorgensen, and he would come up over drafting and he would say, you know, you're very, very strong in spatial analysis and math and science. Have you ever considered studying architecture? So I'm in 10th grade, and this is the first time anybody's actually suggested an actual degree or discipline. And Tyler, that was literally the only person that ever suggested an actual area of study or degree. One and only time it ever happened. So guess what my degree was at Berkeley? Architecture. Because literally, like I'm like, yeah, he's right. You know, he knows me and he knows that I'm really strong. Thank you. And so everything I did was, again, tunnel vision, you know, apply to the best architecture school in the country, and it was Berkeley. And applied directly, not to letters and science like all the undergraduates. You know, I didn't even know about that. I applied to the School of Environmental Design and Architecture because that's what Mr. Jorgensen suggested, and I respected his opinion. So those two educators were instrumental. Then there was math and science teachers in 7th grade who would let me challenge, my math teacher would let me challenge him in like the time to math tests. because I loved just, having a competitive attitude, and he would let me race him, and a couple of us would go in there until we beat him one day. So that mindset, like early on, of having teachers encourage that competition. And again, the opposite of what I'm hearing in my home, where I'm supposed to just be pretty and wear earrings for my ears that were pierced as a baby girl, because, they pierce your ears when you're 3 months old so that you can wear earrings your whole life. Thanks. So it was the opposite of that. And they were instrumental. And of course, my parents were always supportive. But, I have to say, it wasn't always easy, because they did label me a rebelde, a rebel, especially my mom, because all the other girls came home from school and would help with the domestic chores. I was at volleyball practice. I was at band practice. I was at the Friday night games, right? So I wasn't doing the domestic assistant thing that was expected in my neighborhood. And so I was a rebelde. So there was constant conflict with my mother about where I was spending my time, because she thought that it was a bad reflection on her that I was doing all these things. So my mom, that's the way she thought. My dad's like, yeah, you can go to school. I will support you going to school. I knew he couldn't financially support, but he supported it, from moral support. But my mom's like, yeah, you can go to school, but you got to live here, because proper young girls don't move out of the house until they get married. So all of that. So yeah, they were supportive ultimately, but there was a lot of that tension. And that's the tension of living as we call ourselves, like people say bicultural. I call myself ambicultural, ambos in Spanish, dos, both, right? We're ambicultural. I'm not bisecting myself and saying I'm half Latina and half American. I'm like 100% both, right? But that tension of living in this country with all its opportunity, social media, like you said, the imagery, the information, like all the possibilities, but then you're always getting pulled by the forces of culture and religion and, the immigrant experience, all of that. It's very confusing to be a teenager and be living those two lives. And I encourage it. I encourage the chaos to happen, because that's how you bust out. And I have to tell you, my message that I say always, or I present, is on the other side of fear is the best version of yourself. The fear's there. I'm not saying don't be afraid, because that's, humans are going to be afraid. So yeah, it's there. Acknowledge the fear. But on the other side of that fear is the best version of yourself. Whoever you're going to be that's going to amaze you, it's on the other side of that fear. So your job is to figure out how you're going to partner with somebody and get around over that fear to find out who you can become.
Incredible. Well, it has been amazing to be able to hear your story today and to hear your advice. If kids want to learn more about you, or if they want to see your book, where would be the best place to go?
It's very easy. Just what my son called me, Captain Mama, Captain MAMA. That's it. Find me there, contact button. If you want to email me directly, I'm Grace@CaptainMama. And my full name that I'm sure you'll put somewhere, you can find me on Instagram there. A lot of teachers are on Instagram, and then also on LinkedIn. So those are my two places where I exist on social media, but Captain Mama is the best place to start.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today.